Welcome to 1189, an online Bible commentary. My name is Tyler Marston, and today we're taking a look at Matthew chapter 18. As we've seen Jesus' ministry grow, we've seen some people embrace him and some people reject him. But we've also seen Jesus grow to be a little more transparent with his impending death and resurrection, along with his status as Messiah. But Jesus has a plan even further ahead as to how people who embrace him should live their lives. In this chapter, we find the fourth of the 5 main discourses that Matthew has based his gospel around. This block of Jesus' teaching discusses humility, discipleship, and forgiveness, all of which should be mainstays of the church. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus and said, "Who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" The disciples want to be great because everybody wants to be great. Everyone wants to do their best. Everybody wants to be the best at what they do. Martin Luther King Jr. called this the drum major instinct, the instinct that everybody wants to be in the front of the parade. And he called a child to himself and set him before them and said, "Truly I say to you, unless you are converted and become like children, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever then humbles himself as this child, he is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven." Jesus calls up a kid and says that greatness in the kingdom is not judged by how many people you lead to Christ, or how many mission trips you go on, or how much money you give, right? Those are all the world's standards of success. Jesus instead says that greatness in the kingdom is measured by humility. To be great in the kingdom of heaven, you have to fully submit to Jesus and his authority as much as a child submits to their parents. "And whoever receives one such child in my name receives me. But whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to stumble, it would be better for him to have a heavy millstone hung around his neck and to be drowned in the depth of the sea. Woe to the world because of its stumbling blocks. For it is inevitable that stumbling blocks come, but woe to that man through whom the stumbling blocks come." Now Jesus says, as we are humbly submitting to his authority, we should also be discipling other people around us, right? And leading others to become closer in their relationship with God. This goes both for literal children and people who are young in their faith. But on the flip side, he has harsh words for people who make young believers stumble. Now, he does know that everybody ultimately is responsible for their own decisions, right? And no one can avoid stumbling blocks altogether. By the way, that's an idiomatic phrase that literally refers to a trap for an animal. But he also says that people who become stumbling blocks, people who encourage young believers to disobey God, they should beware of a coming judgment. That's what it means to woe something. If your hand or your foot causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it from you. It is better for you to enter life crippled or lame than to have 2 hands or 2 feet and be cast into the eternal fire. And if your eye causes you to stumble, pluck it out and throw it from you. It is better for you to enter life with 1 eye than to have 2 eyes and be cast into the fiery hell. See that you do not despise one of these little ones, for I say to you that their angels in heaven continually see the face of my Father who is in heaven. Meanwhile, Jesus has some advice for those young believers, those people who might be stumbling in their faith. And let's be honest, no matter how long you've been following Jesus, it's easy for all of us to stumble in our faith. Jesus says to take drastic measures in throwing away anything that tempts you, anything that causes you to fall away from following Jesus. And it's very similar to his teachings on adultery back in Matthew chapter 5. But he also offers a promise that God is always with his disciples, even those who are very young. So it's both an encouragement and a warning not to lead them astray. What do you think? If any man has 100 sheep, and one of them has gone astray, does he not leave the 99 on the mountains and go and search for the one that is straying? If it turns out that he finds it, truly I say to you, he rejoices over it more than over the 99 which have not gone astray. So it is not the will of your Father who is in heaven that one of these little ones perish. Then Jesus gives the parable of the lost sheep. God rejoices over each and every sinner that comes to him in humility, no matter how seemingly insignificant. And in this context, it again shows the importance of discipleship, that we love our Christian brothers and sisters enough to seek them and bring them back in when they're lost. If your brother sins, go and show him his fault in private. If he listens to you, you have won your brother. But if he does not listen to you, take 1 or 2 more with you, so that by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses every fact may be confirmed. If he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if he refuses to listen even to the church, let him be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. Now, the obvious counter-argument to the lost sheep parable is, what if your lost brother doesn't want to be found? What if you try and lead him back to God and he doesn't want to follow? And so Jesus gives instructions on what to do with brethren who are obstinately sinful. Jesus says the first thing to do is give them a second chance and a third chance, while also checking with other believers to make sure your claim against someone is spiritually valid. And he quotes Deuteronomy 19 there, which are laws about how to conduct court hearings. Of course, if your sinning brother still won't repent, then Jesus says treat them as you would a Gentile or a tax collector. Now, this sounds harsh until you remember Jesus has been healing Gentiles and eating with tax collectors. And what he means is, don't invite them into big decisions or sacred relationships, right? Don't let them get so close that they begin to lead you astray. But continue to love them, absolutely, and continue to love them so much that you try to lead them back to Jesus, just like you would someone who was a Gentile or a tax collector. Truly I say to you, whatever you bind on earth shall have been bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall have been loosed in heaven. Again I say to you, that if two of you agree on earth about anything that they may ask, it shall be done for them by my Father who is in heaven. For where two or three have gathered together in my name, I am there in their midst. And Jesus again cites the power of church relationships and of discipleship relationships. It's similar to what he said to Peter earlier in chapter 16. James says that when a righteous person prays, much is accomplished. So imagine how much more is accomplished when many people who are all holding each other accountable towards righteousness, when they all begin to pray together. Then Peter came and said to him, Lord, how often shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? Up to 7 times? So in reference to all this, Peter has a question. He says, well, let's say my brother sins, and I do all these steps to try and lead him back into community with the believers. And he rejects it. He continues to live his own way. Then one day he comes to his senses and comes back and begs for forgiveness. How often should I grant that forgiveness and let him back in? 7 times? Now, rabbis near this time, in Pharisaical fashion, were obsessed with questions like these. Rabbi Joseph ben Jehuda taught that God only forgave someone up to 3 times for the same sin. Likewise, Rabbi Joseph ben Hanina taught that one should only have to ask for forgiveness 3 times from a neighbor, and if they still don't forgive you, then you're off the hook. And Peter, being oh so forgiving, doubles that 3 and adds 1, gets to 7, the number of completion. Very generous, very spiritual. And Jesus laughs. Jesus said to him, I do not say to you up to 7 times, but up to 70 times 7. Wow, that's a lot. Of course, this is just hyperbole, right? It doesn't mean literally 490 times. That would just be more Pharisaism. Jesus commands us to forgive an infinite number of times, and then he tells a parable to further justify himself. For this reason, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who wished to settle accounts with his slaves. When he had begun to settle them, one who owed him 10,000 talents was brought to him. But since he did not have the means to repay, his lord commanded him to be sold, along with his wife and children and all that he had, and repayment to be made. So the slave fell to the ground and prostrated himself before him, saying, Have patience with me, and I will repay you everything. And the lord of that slave felt compassion, and released him and forgave him of the debt. But that slave went out and found one of his fellow slaves who owed him 100 denarii. And he seized him and began to choke him, saying, Pay back what you owe. So his fellow slave fell to the ground and began to plead with him, saying, Have patience with me, and I will repay you. But he was unwilling, and went and threw him in prison until he should pay back what was owed. So when his fellow slaves saw what had happened, they were deeply grieved, and came and reported to their lord all that had happened. Then summoning him, his lord said to him, You wicked slave, I forgave you all that debt because you pleaded with me. Should you not also have had mercy on your fellow slave in the same way that I had mercy on you? And his lord, moved with anger, handed him over to the torturers until he should repay all that was owed to him. My heavenly Father will also do the same to you if each of you does not forgive his brother from your heart. Right? And the point of the story is that God has already forgiven us of a nearly infinite amount of sins. It would be incredibly hypocritical for us to turn around from that and to cap forgiveness for someone else's sins against us. When we take a minute and really think about how much forgiveness we've received, it should motivate us that much more to turn around and extend that forgiveness to others. Forgiveness, humility, discipleship, and accountability should all be the pillars of our relationships with other Christ followers. They should impact every decision at every level of the church body. If they're not, we're leading people away from God, we're causing them to stumble, and we know what Jesus said about that. But when we first have a proper relationship with God, who's forgiven us of so much, it becomes that much easier to have a proper relationship with other people around us. Thanks for watching 1189. I hope you have a good day, and God bless.